It's started. Okay.
Excellent. Hello, welcome, good afternoon. This is Nathan Crook. Thank you for joining GB & Smith this afternoon. Director of Sales here with GB & Smith. I'm joined by my Senior Pre-Sales Engineer, Pauline Lancaster. And today we have a very special guest, Jay Riddle. He's a Senior SAP BI Solution Architect at Lockheed Martin. And we're going to be discussing how Lockheed Martin's BI team and HANA team are leveraging the 360Suite to accomplish a migration from Oracle database to HANA. So let's get right to it. To give everyone a level set on why we're having this conversation is the 360Suite is made up of 5 main pieces. You can see the different components on your screen now. 360 View is the alternative to the CMC, gives you bulk capabilities around managing security, as well as all kinds of bulk capabilities around managing the CMC. 360 Plus is our solution around backup, promotion, version control of content, and that brings us into 360 Cast, scheduling and bursting your business objects reports, alternative to publications. 360 Bind is around automating the process of testing Webi and Crystal reports. And last but not least, 360 Eyes is our BI on BI and impact analysis tools. So this is the foundation of our conversation. I'm about to hand it over to Jay to begin the conversation, but please make sure that as we go, type in your questions. We're going to have a little bit of time at the end. If for some reason we can't get to your question, we will definitely follow up at the end, but we want this to be interactive, so make sure that you send those over to us. So Jay, why don't you take us into things?
Great, Nate, thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Jay Riddle. As Nate said, I'm a BI solution architect at Lockheed Martin, specifically at Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. We have a number of different business areas, including space systems and missiles and fire control and RMS, which now oversees Sikorsky helicopters. So a wide range of different business areas, and we each have our own different infrastructures. Here at Aeronautics, we were one of the first and largest Suite on HANA implementations. We've had HANA for, 3 or 4 years, in addition to that as a sidecar, before we went to Suite on HANA. And as part of that investment, we are obviously want to leverage the power of HANA. And so we made a decision to start migrating a lot of our data, a lot of our SAP data that currently resides in an Oracle data warehouse. We are not a business warehouse shop. So we store a lot of our SAP data in Oracle. And of course, all your various different non-SAP data sources, looking for opportunities to migrate a lot of those to HANA as well. So obviously that eliminates the cost of supporting a lot of redundant processes. We have a lot of SAP data that's being put into our HANA sidecar, but also it's redundantly being put into Oracle still because we have dependencies, reports, users that are using that today. We want to get rid of a lot of that, right? We want to leverage the power of in-memory in HANA and increase the performance of a lot of this content as well. And from an IT strategy perspective, we're re-engineering a lot of the views, right? So obviously in HANA, it's not a simple one-to-one. We want to identify opportunities to, either get rid of a lot of maybe objects, dimensions, things that are not being used heavily, if we can find no usage around them, develop a methodology that's different and quite different. And we've been really creating that methodology in a fluid manner over the course of the last several years as our guys become experts really at this building and modeling in HANA. And then identify high profile targets first, low-hanging fruit, and then leave less value items, things that are not being used, leave them alone, watch the usage, and hopefully they dry up, become obsolete. And in other words, use a dry on the vine strategy. Next slide, please. So just to give you a perspective of our landscape, I always tend to hesitate and tell people, well, we're large or we're really big, or because it really depends on what your experience is. But I think we're a rather large landscape from my experience over the years of consulting before I joined Lockheed Martin a few years ago. we have in our current business objects environment, what I'll call our legacy business objects environment, which sits on top of Oracle in Marietta, Georgia, where we manufacture our C-130s. We have well over 3 years of audit data. There was never a strategy to archive that data, and so we have 182 gigabytes of audit data sitting in an Oracle repository. We have over 4,500 active users, and what that means is across, actually I think this may be across both our landscapes, we have 4,500 users, which means that they've logged on at least once in the last 30 days. And in our Marietta environment, our business objects landscape on Oracle, we have well over 65,000 web intelligence reports, and the 95% of those reports are in personal folders and inboxes because we are a very self-service organization, and we have a lot of universes for people to play in. As you can see, 259 universes. And we actually have a number of legacy Crystal Reports users today, and so we have 6,300 over 6,300 Crystal Reports in our landscape today as well. And in this scenario, the destination that we're trying to get to, right, or where we're either quote unquote migrating to or recreating universes against HANA in different business area or functional areas, is our business objects environment on HANA, which is in a totally different geographic location. And so the requirements for us to be successful, if we break it down to 5 things, is we need to gather usage of all these reports and universes, various objects, schedules, so we can smartly move that content. And we need to do impact analysis, not only on the content in our business objects environment that's reporting largely against Oracle, but also we want to then take a look at some content that was migrated a number of years ago, early on when we first got HANA, before we really understood our environment, before we had the power of a tool like 360Suite. And so we want to do impact analysis on a lot of our existing universes and reports in our business objects environment on HANA, so that we can identify opportunities to trim those down or find where there's content that's not being readily used. Also, we need executive reporting. Our managers want to know how we're moving along. How do we quantify success? What's our ROI? We're spending all this money on the migration. Who's moving? Who's not? Why are people not using the new content that we've migrated? Have they stopped using the content that is sitting in the old landscape once they have their reports repointed to new universes and HANA? Those types of things. So we wanted the ability to develop those and for our managers to trust that data. We also have an opportunity to, with something like 360Suite, because it isn't a one-trick pony, it's got a lot of different capabilities, is we also saw that it had the ability to improve our promotion management process. So we have a standalone promotion management server per best practices by SAP. It sits in our Marietta environment, and it points to our business objects landscapes, dev, QA, and prod there, as well as our dev, QA, and prod environments over in Denver that sits on top of our HANA landscape. And unfortunately, when we try to move a lot of bulk content, large quantities of reports, we start to have difficulties. We get failures, partial results, things of that nature. And so we wanted more consistency in that, and that's something, and it was an opportunity provided to us in this suite of tools as well. Also, last but not least, is we want to reduce the risk and improve efficiency by using project-based automated testing. Today, before 360, we send an Excel workbook to people whenever we upgrade, or in this situation, maybe because of migration, people want to see and compare reports they built against a new universe in HANA, against the previous ones in the other landscape. And if we make those available to them, we would really like our users to be able to run those diagnostics themselves. So instead of relying on either just visual aids or gut checks and documenting it in an Excel workbook and checking a box and saying it's done, if we can automate that process and make it attractive to the business to actually do the testing, because quite often the testing doesn't get done before an upgrade, we'll get incomplete workbooks, things of that nature, because they just have too many reports to test. So if they do testing, they test one report, maybe two of their what they deem as their important reports, but that's not the rest of them. So quite often we find mistakes or issues or problems that pop up after an upgrade because we didn't quantify all the reports, and they just don't have the time to test everything, and we don't either. We just don't have that bandwidth as a business objects administration team. Next slide, please. So with that being said, I could probably show you our landscape in 10 different ways, but the purpose of this is just to kind of drive down to the bare bones of what's the kind of relationship information we're trying to keep track of. What are all the pieces we're trying to pull together and understand, and then incrementally attack as a migration team. And so in the top left, you can see we have our Suite on HANA environment, and those SAP tables get SLT'd into a sidecar or a BI HANA instance. And we also are still pumping that data on a daily basis, either through data services or Informatica, into our Oracle data warehouse. So we have a lot of redundancies, right? And we want to get rid of those, but we also know it's not as simple as just cutting off the faucet and waiting till people scream, right? It's not as simple. There's a lot of complexities. So we need to understand those relationships, the relationships between the ETL jobs, the databases, all those things. And then you can see that we also have a Hadoop landscape that's been newly introduced. So that introduces some additional layers, as well as, we have a lot of direct ODBC users. So even though we won't be talking about that so much in this discussion, you can just see the grand scope of this migration project involves a lot of things, and not necessarily in the purview of 360, but all important nonetheless. Next slide. So again, we need to identify all of the database connections and usage, right? So if we break them out into 4 areas, we talk about direct access, whether that's third-party applications, non-SAP business objects related applications, whether that's direct user client access. I don't care if they're in Excel or Access, or they're using some other application, Toad, whatever it may be to access the data. We need to understand what that is. And then we also need to understand the various different ETL jobs that are taking place across both data services and Informatica. And then track that lineage, and that lineage meaning running all the way from the ETL jobs all the way up into the reporting, and understanding reporting usage from the universes, what universe objects are being used inside the universe, what reports are being used, are there schedules, all those types of things. We need to understand that and then piece all of that together in a way that's trusted so we can move forward successfully. So, not only worrying about the inbound, but the outbound of all that traffic into those different things. And we're also talking about Hyperion users, about 1,500 Hyperion users we're contending with as well. And now Tableau, which really is, if you consider it, it's really ODBC, we'll consider that direct access for the time being in terms of Tableau desktop development. But we're also moving to Tableau server. So that's some additional things we need to take into consideration. Next slide, please. So if we break that out and talk lineage specifically, right, we're looking at ETL, and we'll take the example of Informatica. So we need to link the ETL target tables to the tables in the database views. Not a big problem. We've got very smart DBAs. Oracle comes with all the tools you need in your tool belt to get all that information out and get moving with that. So not a big problem. Just taking a fine tooth comb to that is one thing, but getting the data out is not really the issue. Then linking those database tables and views to views in the universe, and now you're leaping from the Oracle database into the data foundation of business objects. And so that semantic layer, you start to get into some metadata, right, concerns, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's not as simple as just saying, oh, I'm going to run an audit report. Well, maybe some of that data is in the CMS, maybe some of that data is in the audit repository. We need to link those database tables all the way to ODBC feeds. We're not going to really talk about that in the context of 360, but when it comes to Webi, dashboards, Crystal, we then need to understand the relationships between those and universes. And are there queries of web services? Are there still Excelsius dashboards that are being used? We still have some of those as well, although we are going to Design Studio in a lot of cases. And then a lot of the usage around that. So not only usage, but also where is all this content located? Are there schedules associated with it? Are there things inside the schedule we need to be concerned about? that we need to tell the users, hey, you've got a service account, or there's a network folder path you're scheduling a report to that's embedded in there. Are there publications? We need to know whether our other landscape, because it is in a different geographic location, there are different firewalls, things of that nature. We need to make sure they can still talk to the same network locations that those reports are going to. All sorts of intricacies that come to play. And so it goes from simple to more complex to more complex to more complex to more complex. So it just gets increasingly complex, and especially as we get into the realm of data foundation up through users, it becomes quite the quagmire when you try to understand all of that data and actually find a way to merge all that information in a manner that's still trusted. Next highlight, please. So when we talk about trusting the data, many of you may have come from legacy business objects days, or you're familiar with the business objects boards. You may have seen where people were nice enough to develop SDK or use the SDK to develop macros or workbooks in Excel that can plug into your CMS, and you can pull data out of it without having to rely on the clunky query builder, which not only results in data being viewed in a I would say on its side or sideways, I like to say, which is then not really easily copied and pasted. Those macros created an ability to pull that data into those workbooks and be able to kind of start understanding things, as you said, documenters, right? Documenting your environment, what workbooks are being used, you know, do you want to know what relationships exist? And those work to a certain extent. The problem is, every time you patch the system, it could break it. You start steadily using trust in the data, and the data you do trust, a lot of the times for a purpose of a migration project like this, it's only partial data. It's only getting you part of the story. So then often you have to go run your own audit queries. And, you know, great, I can build a Webi report off the audit repository. That's, again, getting some partial information, but sometimes I need CMS data to merge with that to get the whole story. So what you end up doing is creating quite often these massive workbooks where you're manually taking data that you've either pulled maybe from Toad or whatever your SQL tool is from your audit repository, and then blending it with CMS data. And then you have to manually refresh that on a daily or weekly basis as your project moves forward so you can get snapshots and understand how you're progressing. And then often that will break the workbook, or again, you start losing trust in the data. So that's when we started to look towards third-party tools. So we started to use a competitor of 360 before we knew of them in the landscape. And at first, everything was hunky-dory. But the problem is we have a lot of data. Again, 3 years plus of audit repository data. And we also have a lot of objects. And so over time, we started to notice that it struggled with the algorithms that it used to incrementally get that data. It began to struggle. And then we also had problems where there were updates to the product. And because they have one giant universe, it didn't take much to sneeze on it to cause a problem. And because it's one universe, pulling all of its repository information where it's melded at CMS and your audit data all into its own repository, that could be an issue because it's a single point of failure. And again, you start to lose trust in the data. And so we started to look again. And that's when we came across 360. And one of the things, or actually a number of things that were attractive, is 360 uses a different, well, I would say a very keep it simple approach, where instead of incrementally crawling and constantly crawling your CMS or your audit repository, it actually allows you to set up jobs that you can actually pick and choose what kind of data you want to crawl on a particular day, week, hour, whatever you want. So it's either, if you're concerned about impacting the performance of your production system or whatever it may be, you can actually have more granular control over that. Number two, it also means that it handles large sets of data with its proprietary algorithms much better than some of its competitors. And so when we did a demo of it, we tended to have, still, it may take a few days to crawl our huge sets of data, but it was much faster and it was actually more trustworthy in the end. Which is what we were looking for. So everything was there after it did run. And in fact, they've come out with updates recently that's heavily increased the performance, and it's actually feels like it's at least doubled it for us. But because our crawls are so big, I don't think we're seeing some of the performance gains that other customers with smaller repositories are seeing, sometimes up to 5 times the increase in performance, from what I understand. So we had a much better ROI. And then the last thing is, you know, we have a lot of overhead. And a lot of overhead, meaning we've got certain tools that do our monitoring for us, certain tools that would do this or that, certain tools for our BI on BI. We needed to, if we're going to continue to purchase products like this, we need to reduce our overhead. We need to simplify the licensing structure. We need to find something that can take some of these tools off the table and replace them. And 360 offered us a number of opportunities there, and that's also in what we call 360 Bind, and then 360 Plus, and then we were talking with the BI and BI piece, the 360 Eyes. And so it gave us some additional capabilities within the spectrum of promotion management and improving that, as well as automated testing and managing bulk users and security that was attractive to us. So that was just a bonus on top of everything else. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nate, but I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about some of the pieces that we use, and I hope that gives you a good oversight. Again, if you have questions, pop them in there. If we don't have time, because I do tend to talk a long time, I hope I haven't taken up too much time, Nate, but if there is enough time, I'm sure they'll get those questions if they are specific to Lockheed Martin, and I can get back to Nate, and they can relay those answers to you.
Absolutely. Between you and I, it can be a challenge. So 360 Eyes, like I mentioned at the top, 360 Eyes is our BI on BI metadata impact analysis tool. It really is designed to bring all the different sources of data that you have around your business objects, your FRS, your CMS, and your auditor together. And so one of the questions I had really is more about how have you and the different teams on your BI groups been leveraging the different parts of 360 Eyes so far?
So the important thing for us is 360 is practically invisible. So instead of having to install, which a lot of these third-party tools, a clunky client, we have to set up a whole other server to install a clunky client tool, or it's actually something that you go and select in the start menu and you got to bring up and update all the time with everything else. We just had basically a client that, you know, we deploy on our existing, you know, a server with Tomcat running with our existing, you know, business objects web tier, and it just embeds itself there and deploys. It's very simple. It took a matter of really minutes to install, so that was nice. And then also, you know, it's leveraging the existing business objects environment, right? So coming with canned universes, canned reports, that allows me to take those reports, plop them in a public folder for our HANA migration team, and allow them to run with it, to make copies of those reports, create customizations, you know, and really let them just move forward without me or the BO admins becoming a bottleneck to having to be the server of the data. So creating that self-service landscape with that was very important to us. And then also having that granular control over those crawls, so they know exactly what's going on. They know, okay, well, this runs every Monday. We know this data is a week old, and they just, okay, that's fine. They can move forward with that. So that's also very important.
Absolutely. That's something that I've seen pervasive over a lot of different clients that have dug into 360 Eyes. You know, they're finding that, you know, maybe they brought it in for just a migration project, but over time, it turns out that having access to this type of information on an ongoing basis actually gives them capabilities that frankly, they wish they had had all along, to just be able to report to management or answer questions from an administrative or a user standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about it, right, it's not like 360 is digging into some secret mine where there's this hidden data that you couldn't get to on your own, right? Like I talked about, right. You can get to the CMS data in a myriad of different ways, and there's some organizations that have spent the time and effort to use the SDK to build things out of box to talk to that and get their data out. But then you have the Auditor repository, which has other data, and well, quite often for us, we need to blend that data together. So having that standalone repository by itself, away from the CMS and the Auditor repository, where we can hammer it all day long and run reports against it without impacting our existing landscape, is just of paramount importance for us.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings us to the next topic that we touched on coming through, and that's 360 View. So this piece is a part of the web apps in the 360 suite. If that's not clear to you, there are a ton of demos and different videos out there on YouTube. You'll see the link to that at the very end. But 360 View, just to recap, is the bulk CMC capabilities, not only security, but also really anything management from an audit or from an administrator standpoint. And so my question is, what have you found to be the more valuable pieces for the Lockheed Martin team so far in here?
Yeah, so this was something that was interesting. And again, this wasn't something that was sort of in our initial migration needs that popped up to us and said, well, oh, that's our most important need. But once we realized it was part of the suite and it was an opportunity for us, we identified that we're using another third-party tool to do some of these things, because we have a lot of users. And we still are going to be using our Oracle business objects landscape for at least another couple of years, right? It's not as simple as hitting a switch and turning everything off, right? So what that means is, unlike HANA, where we leverage quite often just one or two or a handful of service accounts that are all hitting HANA, well, Oracle, we may have over the years, 4 or 5 dozen different service accounts, and those, guess what? Their passwords reset on an annual basis, and they change, and so we could have week to week 5 or 6 different passwords we have to change. So we identified, sure, this is not something that is necessarily groundbreaking. There's a tool that does this, but we could get rid of that other tool, reduce our overhead, and switch to 360 and start doing those activities in 360 instead of having yet another client tool that's running on another server that we have to manage, which is taking up another physical hardware or VM or whatever it may be. That's still overhead, right? So reducing that footprint again and having something where we can bulk reset. And this also opened up an interesting thing is through the demo process where you guys provided us really an extended period to really get our hands on the tool without any stress of oh, we have only X number of days to do it, and working with us as though we were really production with you, as though we had already put the stamp on the PO. We came across and got to really get familiar with your support process. And one of the exciting things with that is we really identified that when we found something that we wanted, and we said, we discovered with, there may be better opportunities with the way that you show your crystal report lineage or list of values and how they relate to business views, and we want that to be better. And we think it can be better, and we think that your tool probably has the capability to just enhance that. Or we want the ability to an easier way to change a password or whatever it may be. We can go to the support site, open up an enhancement request, and that same day we'll get a response or feedback. And quite often we're told either you're already thinking about it, it's in the next release, or we hope to work with you, get in touch with actually some of the key players that work with the product and develop the product, get on the phone with them, and actually they're inquisitive and actually are curious about this and want to enhance the product in a way that their customers find valuable.
Yeah, I find over and over that our security or our support team absolutely blows people away with their ability to not only deliver a good product, but also to address any challenges or exactly that. Go, you know what? We actually think that would make a great update to the rest of it, and you know what? It'll be available in 2 weeks. We'll send you a notice. So. That's kind of cool that you've already gotten to understand and know more about that. And I guess they don't just put new boxes growing on trees, so that's nice to be able to cut out different pieces of the landscape and focus in on one. So that's a great overview. And just to round this out, let's go on to 360 Bind to dig just a little deeper there. So 360 Bind is the automated process for testing Webi and Crystal documents in the landscape. And next slide. There we go. Just waiting on the lag. Perfect. So with 360 Bind, I know this was probably another piece that was more of going to be a nice to have, but ultimately you guys decided to move forward and test it extensively on this. What have you found to be the bigger value attached to this piece?
Sure. So initially we thought, well, long term, maybe there's a need in the migration capacity, right? These days we've gotten pretty streamlined in how we are now building our new universes in HANA to replicate those that were on Oracle, and then move over content so that they can just basically, they're built in a way that users can actually just repoint their reports to the new universe. And so there's not a lot of investment in recreating new reports, but there may be opportunities down the road when we get to some of the more complex reports where they may not be able to just repoint them. They may have to rebuild them. And in that context, being able to actually see, instead of using your eyes or gut check to hope that you've got it built the same way or it looks the same, we want people to be able to run their own tests and say, well, the data is coming back the same, but also the presentation layer, the formatting, this chart is in the right area, it's in the right footer, header, those types of things. We don't know everyone's reports, right? To have to push that to the BO admin team is not realistic. And it puts also a wait time in the old, I'm waiting on IT, number one, but number two is we don't know your data. We don't know your reports. Your team knows those things. So let's put that in the hands of yourself. So that sort of self-service was attractive. In that same breath, self-service automated testing is important for future upgrades, because today we send out an Excel workbook and we basically pray that you go through there, that you test all your reports, that you check all the boxes in that test script, right? Or you create your own test scripts. There's a lot of wiggle room, and there's a lot of times where maybe they only have time, the business only has time to test a couple reports in a few week period before the upgrade out of their 50 reports. So they just are doing a guesstimate and hoping that if they didn't have problems in the most complex ones, they won't have problems in their other reports, or they don't do the testing at all. And so to be able to put something in their hands, and what we hope to do is make it self-service so that they can basically create their own tests and run their own automated testing after an upgrade, pre and post, and it stores those results so it can then run a comparison. And they can basically do it on with a script. They can either choose to look at it in the tool, or they could just say, you know what, I want this tool to just give me a summary report and flag anything that might be an issue. So instead of wasting time looking at every report, I only look at the reports that are flagged as or potential issues. And so that's something that we're keen to start using going forward.
Absolutely. Huge time saver, time over time of testing, but not only making sure that the business can trust the type of reports and know for a fact that things are exactly as they're supposed to be. So that brings us around to where I believe we're looking at questions. Yes, indeed. All right. So in fact, I've got the first question here, Jay. So how long did it take to deploy the 360 suite?
1 day. So I think our prior tool we used, it took us a week or so to really get through it. I'd say it took a couple hours to deploy it, and then maybe we had a nice day or two of really, it was up to our discretion of getting knowledge transfer on, your typical, what's that button do, So
Right.
we were off to the races very quickly.
Right. Let's see here. Next question is challenges. So have you found any challenges either in deployment or using, and how have you seen those addressed?
So I'd say most of our challenges were before 360, and I alluded to that, right? Data quality, losing trust in the data from other products or manual running of reports. And so regaining that trust was very important. One of the challenges with deploying is just the sheer size of our repository, we had some difficulties with the crawls running. What we found out is we were actually running out of table space in our Oracle database. So that wasn't a 360 issue. It would have kept on running, but after 3 days, we actually hit table space issues. So we went ahead, we resized, we realized we just didn't size appropriately, and you have a nice sizing calculator that we didn't take advantage of. And so if we had done so the first time, we'd probably been okay, because we created a new repository, much larger, and ever since then, everything's been running just fine.
Nice. Okay, so actually I think we've got one more question that we can get to here with the timing. So yeah, 360 eyes, I think, is what you're referencing here. Were the reports provided with the 360 suite enough, or was there some sort of customization needed for you and the team?
Yes. So I would say for the purpose of migration, the canned reports gave us 70% of what we needed. And then it was just a matter of actually just our team creating copies of those reports and then adding dimensions that already existed in the universe. I think I don't know if we've come across an issue where we had to request something yet. We may have requested like an enhancement that was already set to come in a newer version that we're not on yet, or maybe we haven't put in the new universe. But I think it's just taking the existing dimensions and classes in the existing universes and pulling those into the canned reports. So basically enhancing the canned reports and making our own customized copies. So I think maybe our migration team maybe spent a total of 10 or 20 hours doing customizations. And a lot of that time was just reading through the documentation or opening support requests to help us understand the terminology used. Because there's so much data, and you could call it 5 different things each dimension to describe what it is. And so sometimes it's just a matter of knowledge transfer and understanding, like where in the universe do we need to grab, like where can we find the object that we need to get us the answer.
Exactly. No, that totally makes sense. Oh man, unfortunately we have pushed right up against our time limit, so we're going to have to answer the rest of these questions in a follow-up email. But I just want to say thanks so much, Jay. Really appreciate the time and the energy that you put into not only testing and ultimately investing with GB and Smith and the 360 suite, but also just the time that you spent here with us today. I really, it means a lot, and I know that a lot of people are going to find this valuable. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pauline. I appreciate it as well. And please, everybody, if you have questions after we're done with the presentation, the contact information there was on the slide. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.